Google so that he could freely discuss the risks of AI. And that is what I want to ask him about today. Jeffrey, welcome.
Thank you.
So first, before we get into the bad stuff, I want to, give people a sense of the amazing creativity that produced AI and the thrill you must have felt. So at what point did you start to realize as a professor that you were beginning to, you were getting computers to be able to think?
So back in 1986, we started using an algorithm that was invented by many different people called backpropagation. And at that point, we created computers to do a little bit of thinking, but it didn't work as well as we hoped. And at that point, we didn't really understand that all we needed was more data and bigger computers. But by about 2006, we had that. And then we started seeing real progress. We started seeing artificial neural networks modeled after the brain, being able to do all sorts of things that conventional symbolic AI had not been able to do, like recognize objects and images, recognize speech, and be able to predict the next word in a sentence.
For you, was there a kind of crossing of the Rubicon moment when you realized that computers were just getting so good and so powerful at AI?
So I think in 2012, two of my graduate students, Ilya Sutskever, who's now the chief scientist at OpenAI, and Alex Krzyzewski, made neural nets that were much better than previous systems at recognizing objects and images. So you'd have 1 million images with 1,000 different kinds of object. And previously, people couldn't do better than getting 25% wrong. And suddenly, Ilya and Alex got 15% wrong. And that was a huge breakthrough. It's clear that this stuff was now working much better than previous ways of doing AI.
When did you start to go from being exhilarated about all this to worrying?
Really only a few months ago. So I was always worried about things like what would happen to the people whose jobs were lost to AI, and would there be battle robots, and what about all the fake news it was going to produce, and what about the echo chambers being produced by getting people to click on things that make them indignant. All those worries I was worried about. But the idea that this stuff will get smarter than us and might actually replace us, I only got worried about a few months ago, when I suddenly flipped my view. My view had been that I'm working on trying to make digital intelligence by trying to make it like the brain. And I assumed the brain is better, and we're just trying to sort of catch up with the brain. I suddenly realized maybe the algorithm we've got is actually better than the brain already. And when we scale it up, we'll get things smarter than us.
And the fundamental reason for that, I think you've said, is that computers learn instantaneously, and every computer in the world, if it's connected, learns, gets to know everything, right? So explain that scale of computing power compared to the brain.
Okay, so if you learn something, and now you want to convey that to me, what you do is you produce sentences, and I try and figure out how I should change the connection strengths in my brain so that I would produce the same sentences. But there's not that much information in a sentence. So it's a very slow and painful business, conveying what you know to somebody else. But if you have two different digital computers that have exactly the same model of the world, and one of them sees one document, and another one sees a different document, and they each learn from the document they're seeing. And so if you have 10,000 computers like that, it's like you had 10,000 people all learning from different data. And as soon as one person learns something, everybody knows it.
And everybody has intelligence is strengthened by that averaging, by the right.
Yes.
So something actually, it means theoretically even human beings could never get to that place.
We could never see enough data. It would take us, I don't know how long, but thousands and thousands of years to see as much data as GPT-4 has seen. We just couldn't do it in a lifetime.
And so that's, at one level, again, exhilarating to think of the extraordinary power that this computer will have, but worrying.
It is worrying because we don't know any examples of more intelligent things being controlled by less intelligent things. I mean, with human societies, you often have dictators who aren't as intelligent as some of the peasants, but that's not a big difference. they're in the same league. But here, these things will get much more intelligent than us. And the worry is, can we keep them working for us when they're much more intelligent than us? They will have, for example, learned how to deceive. They'll be able to deceive us if they want to.
Stay with us. When we come back, more with Jeffrey Hinton. We are back here on GPS with Jeffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of artificial intelligence, who's going to explain his concerns about AI. So when you think about the concerns about AI, how would you describe them very simply to somebody? What is it that you worry about?
So I would distinguish a bunch of different concerns. So there's what I call the existential threat, which is about whether they will wipe out humanity. That's definitely a threat to humanity's existence. The other threats aren't existential in the same sense. The word existential is rather overused. They're very bad, like they'll make a lot of jobs much more efficient by getting chatbots to do it instead of people. There'll be a huge increase in productivity. And the big worry is that huge increase in productivity, which should be good for us, will cause the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer, and that's going to be very bad for society. Then there's things like battle robots, where obviously defense departments would like to have robots that replace soldiers. That's going to make it politically much easier to start wars. There's fake news where it's going to be very hard to know what's true. And there's the division into these warring camps by the big companies trying to get you to click on stuff that'll make you indignant. And so you get these two different echo chambers.
And these are the small problems.
Those are the small problems. Those are the more immediate, and they're not small problems at all. They're huge problems, but they don't involve the end of humanity. So I don't call them existential. And then there's the problem of, if these things get smarter than us, which I believe they will, and many AI researchers are now beginning to believe they will, and in not too long, like in, not in 100 years. So I wish we had a simple solution. Like with climate change, there's a simple solution. You stop burning carbon, and it'll take a while, but you'll end up okay. And it's politically unpalatable for the oil companies, but if you stop burning carbon, you'd solve the problem. Here, there isn't anything like that I know of. The best people can come up with, I think, is that you try and give these things strong ethics. The one advantage we have is that they didn't evolve. We made them. We evolved, and we evolved in small warring tribes of hominids. We wiped out 21 other different species of hominid because we're very competitive and aggressive. And these things don't have to be like that. We're creating them. Maybe we could build them with strong ethical principles behind it.
And you could do that with the algorithms. Because I noticed when you ask ChatGPT a question, say about homosexuality, it gives an answer that is clearly curated in a way to be thoughtful, to be, not to reflect every crazy view about it, but kind of about what the politically correct may be too strong, but it's a sensitive answer. So there is some shaping that takes place. If you ask it, how do you build a nuclear weapon? It says, I won't tell you that.
But if you've ever written a computer program, you know that if you've got a program that's trying to do the wrong thing, and you try and get it to do the right thing by putting guardrails around it, it's a losing proposition. Because you have to think of every way in which it might go wrong. It's much better to start with ethical principles and say, you're always going to follow these principles. But it's going to be hard because, for example, defense departments want robots that'll kill people. So that seems to conflict a bit with putting ethical principles in. There is one piece of good news, which is with nuclear weapons, they were an existential threat. And so even during the Cold War, Russia and the United States could cooperate on trying to prevent a nuclear war, because it was clearly bad for both of them. And with this existential threat, not with the other threats, but with the existential threat, if you take the US and China and Europe and Japan and so on, they should all be able to agree we don't want them to wipe us out. And so maybe you can get cooperation on that.
And you could put some kind of guardrails in or ethical principles in around that.
That's our hope. We don't know if we can make that work, though.
Are you going to be spending time on solving this problem?
I think I'm too old to solve new problems. I've done my bit of solving problems. I will help, but I'm planning to retire.
You leave us. That doesn't really. You leave the humanity in a lurch.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good, does it?
Well, maybe your students are gonna.
My students are very capable, and many of the people I work with are working on this.
All right. Well, we'll have to. On that slender reed, we're gonna have to close this out. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.